My name is Ella Blumenthal, and I'm an Auschwitz survivor. The one thing I want people to remember is that throughout my suffering and fight for survival, I never lost hope. When I was in Auschwitz, I had already lost my entire family and survived only with my niece Roma. She begged me to end our suffering by throwing ourselves onto the electrified fence, because she said that the only way out of Auschwitz was through the chimney. I convinced her to wait one more day, and then again to wait another day, because I wasn't ready to die. I wanted to live. I am now 103 years old, and I have lived my life always believing that tomorrow will be better than today, and that I will never give up, no matter what. My name is Ella Blumenthal. Remember this.
Good evening. I am Allie Rosenberg, alongside my co-chair Stacy Science, the co-presidents of the Enough Club, Eva Millerman and Jared Science, and the Enough Club advisor, Helen Harrison. We welcome you to tonight's 6th annual Holocaust Remembrance Day program. International Holocaust Remembrance Day is commemorated each year on January 27th, which is the day of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest death camp where 1 million Jews were murdered. Survival at Auschwitz was almost impossible. Of the 1 million women, men, children, and elderly who were murdered at Auschwitz, 900,000 were murdered on the day that they arrived.
This year marks the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. The video that you just saw is a part of a campaign launched by the Claims Conference called I Survived Auschwitz, Remember This. When launched in this campaign, the Claims Conference shared, the horrors that occurred at Auschwitz were an evil that no human should ever endure, but also an evil that no human should ever forget.
Last week, tonight's keynote speaker, the incredible Tova Friedman, along with committee co-chair Stacy Science, were together at Auschwitz-Birkenau for the 80th anniversary commemoration. Stacy will share some words with us about the experience.
Last Monday, my son Elliot and I joined together with 56 Auschwitz survivors and dignitaries from all over the world on the grounds of the Auschwitz-Birkenau extermination camp. We listened to Auschwitz survivors, including tonight's keynote speaker, Tova Friedman, who bravely traveled back to Auschwitz, a place that epitomizes evil, to ensure that the world will never forget. I listened to each survivor as they shared intimate details about their own personal stories, stories that humanize the unfathomable atrocities of Auschwitz. Details that my son and I will share with future generations so they know that the Holocaust happened to men, women, and children with personalities and stories, and not to abstract numbers. The survivors reminded us that we cannot let their past become our children's future. I felt embraced by love on the trip by the survivors, who ironically were treated with the worst type of hate, and whose lives were torn apart by hate. Through conversations with the survivors on my journey and with my grandparents who were also survivors, I have learned that the Holocaust is not just a story of hate. It's also a story of resilience, humanity, love, and kindness. As you listen to Tova's story tonight, you will be reminded that even in darkness, hope can prevail. Now, it's my honor to introduce State Senator Peter Harcum to give some remarks.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I want to thank the Newcastle, want to thank the Newcastle Holocaust and Human Rights Committee for doing this every year and for all of the important work you do. The Enough Club, just your courage in educating young people as to the importance of Holocaust remembrance. You know, if you look at the polling and the amount of Holocaust denial and ignorance of young people, it's so vital what you're doing to educate our young people. And Tova, God bless you. Thank you for coming and sharing your truth. And I can only imagine what it was like to go back. I visited Dachau about 20 years ago, and just as a visitor was viscerally ill being there, and just can only imagine. So thank you. God bless you for coming and for sharing your truth with us. We also want to take a minute to pause and pray for the ceasefire to hold and for all of the hostages to come home safely. You know, a perpetuation of evil that we have to stand up against. And we're also reminded on days like this that we need to speak out against anti-Semitism in all its forms, all of the time. But we also need to remember that we're not in a vacuum. I learned something today from one of my colleagues in the Senate, that if you looked at the photo, that iconic photo of Rosa Parks, you see Rosa Parks with her stoic look. But right behind her is a white man. And it turns out that he was a Jewish man from New York who just happened to be in town that day and just happened to be on that bus. And he sensed that something was not right, and he changed his seat and moved up to sit right behind Rosa Parks to protect her from the angry crowd that was there. And it was a Jewish community, because of your shared suffering, who are the first ones to embrace the civil rights movement and the work of Dr. King. And so we're in a challenging time in our country. That, for instance, Black History Month has been canceled in the military. How do you cancel somebody's history? Members of the LGBTQ plus community can no longer get passports. Certain members of the LGBTQ plus community cannot get passports or cannot get health care because their doctors are afraid of losing federal funding. So we have a lot of challenges jointly. So tonight, you know, our focus is on Holocaust education and anti-Semitism. But I'm reminded that we are all in this together, and I think of the words of Martin Niemöller when he said, "First I came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I'm not a communist. And then they came for the socialists. I did not speak out because I'm not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I'm not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me." So thank you for hosting this tonight. It reminds me of the importance of the education work, the fight against anti-Semitism, but that we're all in this together. Thank you all so much. God bless you.
I'm Nicole Wayne, and I'm a member of Enough. Senator Harcum, we thank you for taking your time to be here tonight, for your powerful words, and all that you do to stand up against anti-Semitism and hate. Now it's my honor to introduce Assembly Member Chris Burdick.
Thank you. Thank you. And I first want to thank all of you for being here. It's one of the things that I've noticed, and I think that I don't know whether I've been here for all 6 of these, but I've been here certainly for the last several. And I'm very pleased to see that the number of seats that are taken has increased. And it's a measure of how this community feels about this and how important it is. But I first want to also thank the Newcastle Holocaust Remembrance Committee that put this together, and especially the co-chairs, Allie Rosenberg and Stacy Science, as well as the co-presidents that we were introduced to, Eva Millerman and Jared Science, and the Enough Club advisor, Helen Harrison, who put this all together and do it year after year with the same energy, with the same spirit, with the same conviction. And I too am very much looking forward to hearing from the keynote speaker, Tova Friedman, who will share with us her absolutely amazing story as a Holocaust survivor. So, the way I see this is that this Remembrance Day really tells us many things, but it also tells us how important it is that generation after generation learn the horrific facts about the Holocaust, lest it not only be forgotten, but lest it be watered down. I want to mention the key work of the Holocaust and Human Rights Education Center here in Westchester, whose mission is to enhance the teaching and learning of the lessons of the Holocaust and the right of all people to be treated with dignity and respect. We encourage students to speak up and act against all forms of bigotry and prejudice. I'm pleased that I've been in the position I hold to help advocate for and secure New York State budgetary funding for HHRAC. And the event here in Newcastle also is tremendous testimony, as I mentioned, to this town's commitment to teach those lessons. And I applaud Newcastle, the supervisor, and the town board for their support of the town's Holocaust and Human Rights Committee. We need to do more, ever more, to combat hate crimes, giving the alarming rise in anti-Semitism and race-based intolerance. I'm pleased to report that Governor Hochul included $35 million to protect sites at risk of hate crimes, and an additional $45 million for community-based programs to combat hate crimes, and she has that in her proposed budget. And I can assure you that I certainly will strongly support that, and I'm optimistic that it will be adopted. And I know that Senator Harcum and I are happy to help organizations seeking funding in this regard. As a community and as a nation, we must be vigilant to guard against the recurrence of the horrors of the Holocaust. And only through events like this and the teaching and passing from generation to generation and informing the general public, only in that way can we avoid that recurrence. And it has been said so often, but so true, that if we don't learn from the errors and all of the evils that have occurred in history, then we are condemned to repeat them. But I want to leave you with the words of Simon Wiesenthal, who admonished us as follows: "For your benefit, learn from our tragedy. It is not a written law that the next victims must be Jews. It can also be other people. We saw it begin in Germany with Jews, but people from more than 20 other nations were also murdered. Thank you so much.
I'm Haley Stern, and I'm a member of Enough. It is my honor to introduce County Legislator, who is Chairman of Board and Legislators, Vedat Gashi.
Thank you, Haley. And I'd like to thank all the organizers of the Enough Club and the Newcastle Holocaust and Human Rights Committee for hosting tonight's important and moving event. On this 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, we are reminded that so few survivors remain to tell that story. I am humbled and truly honored to be here with Tova Friedman. Thank you, Tova, and thank you for being here. Your courage and voice remind us to bear witness, and I can't thank you enough for doing it. We gather not only to honor the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children, and countless others who were murdered, but also to mourn those that were never born. Hatred, blind prejudice, and complacency in the face of evil produced the Holocaust and continue to this day. It continues to this day, and I can't help but express my sincere wish that the United States remain a refuge, a safe harbor for people like Tova, people like me and my family who came to this country as refugees, and those suffering today that would need that help. In times of darkness, it's easy to feel powerless, but when we come together as we are doing now, we find that strength and support and the potential path and positive way forward. And I'm honored to be here on behalf of the Westchester County Board of Legislators, because Westchester County continues to stand firm against anti-Semitism and hatred in all its forms. We're still living in the shadow of the barbaric attacks of October 7th, and with so many innocent lives lost and hostages still suffering in captivity, we must reaffirm our commitment to fighting anti-Semitism whenever and wherever we encounter it. And on this day and every day, we stand in solidarity with those who demand the immediate release of all hostages. Bring them home. Thank you.
I am Matthew Wallstatter, and I am a member of Enough. Thank you, County Legislator Gashi, for taking the time to be here tonight and for standing up against anti-Semitism. Now, please welcome Enough Club members Serena Shiro, Ariel Goldner, and Sydney Goodman.
It is our honor to introduce tonight's keynote speaker, Holocaust survivor Tova Friedman. Tova is one of the youngest people to survive the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were murdered and 1.5 million were children. Tova was one of only 5 kids that survived from her hometown. Tova witnessed atrocities that she could never forget and experienced numerous escapes from death.
At the age of 83, Tova wrote her memoir, The Daughter of Auschwitz, which became a New York Times bestseller and has been translated into over 15 languages. Tova is committed to educating the younger generations about the Holocaust, and together with her grandson Aaron Goodman started Tova Talk, a social media account that educates about the Holocaust and where she shares her story
with millions of people across the world.
This summer, Tova has another book coming out, The Girl Who Lived to Tell Her Story, which was written for young adults. Tova has 4 children and 8 grandchildren. Tova shares her story with students and audiences all over the country. Please welcome Tova Friedman.
I'm a pacer, so I hope you could all see me and hear me. Okay, when we first came here, there was these beautiful words about silence, 1 minute of silence for every Holocaust person that was murdered. However, silence is great for the dead. Silence is not good for the living. I don't want anybody to be silent about what's happening now in this country and anti-Semitism. It's the silence that put me into Auschwitz and killed my family. It's the silence that allowed Hitler and his group, his hoodlums, to destroy us all, because the world was silent. That's why I am talking. This year, we were at the commemoration of liberation of Auschwitz. There were about 4,000 people came. However, there were 17 people that survived Auschwitz. 17. 5 years ago, there were 120. So this is the last. This is the last. And I'm afraid of the silence, because people are talking, there will commemoration. Who knows if that's true or not? I don't think that it will happen unless their own lives are touched. That's what human beings are. If we know that our family or our friends may be hurt, then you become active. Otherwise, it's just words, beautiful words. I feel myself that I represent those who are silent because they were killed. 1.5 million children. Let me tell you something. It's a long story. Sorry. I'm still jet lagged. I just came on Thursday night, Friday, very, very late, and I never recuperated. So I'm very glad to be here, but my jet lag is following me, so I'm trying to sort of be ahead of it a little bit. The big army, the big gigantic army of Hitler was focused on 2 populations in the beginning: children and elderly. Why would such a gigantic army, why would the plan be to kill all the elderly? I didn't know anybody with gray hair till I came to America, just about. And why would the children be killed right away? That's what happened when they came to my town. It's a little town called Tomaszow Mazowiecki, and it's central Poland. My grandparents were killed almost immediately, together with the other elderly, and then the children. Now, by the way, what happens in one town happened in other towns as well. This was a plan, in a way, a brilliant plan, a brilliant evil plan. You kill the elderly, all the grandparents. They are the stable people in the family. Do you know that it's very difficult to kill people? You think it's easy? How do you kill millions of people? You have to have a plan. So the plan was, we'll destroy the families. The families. If you destroy the family, you destroy the spirit, the mind, and the willing to live of a human being. Hitler knew that. You know how he knew that? Because he used the best psychologists, PhDs, who wrote books on families. The whole thing of the Holocaust was a plan of the most intelligent people in the country, which was very brilliant to begin with. Beethoven came from there. I mean, you could go down the line. I just came from Germany, and you could see all these famous people everywhere. This is why he was so successful. So kill the family and kill the spirit. My mother lost almost 150 people, brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews. That's it. Not even distant family, close family. My father lost his siblings immediately, and his parents almost right away, because that was the style. How did I survive? In my town, there were hundreds of Jewish children. It was a very Jewish town. You know those little Polish towns? They were like sometimes 50% Jewish. My family was in that town for 200 years. I have a family tree. They feel very comfortable. And yet, when it came the time to separate Jews from non-Jews, they immediately saw who were not their friends. And their neighbors were not their friends. So how did all this happen? Many times I think myself, how did I make it? Out of hundreds of children, 5 were left. 1 is in Europe. I was in Europe. I couldn't find her. She stayed. She never came to America. The other 4 came to America. There are just 2 of us left. 2 of us are representing an entire Jewish population of about 15, 16, I would say, 1,000 Jews. That's it. So I feel like I have to be here to talk about it, with or without jet lag, you know. Okay, so the elderly people are killed immediately. I would say within the first few months. They came in, found out where the elderly were, because of course we had ID cards, and we lived in a ghetto. Immediately, things happened very fast. You know why so fast? Because they had a plan. They knew ahead of time exactly what they're going to be doing. They didn't have to think about it. Nobody had to say, an SS or a Gestapo had to say, now what am I going to do? How will I kill today? He didn't have to. He had a list. That's what you do. And that's what he did, with pride, because that was his job. And this is what he wanted to do. So the elderly were killed immediately. After that, followed the rabbis. You have to destroy a structure. So you destroy the rabbis, the religion. We were very religious Jews. So the rabbis were gone. After that, the teachers who who were there, who the children could look up to. If they're scared, they can go to their teacher. The teachers were killed. So there was no structure. Everything was from the very first, I would say, 2 or 3 weeks. And then there were the elderly, like the mayor of town. You had all these very important people speaking today. They wouldn't have a chance. They would be one of the first people killed. Because again, if you have no one to turn to, so what happens to your mind? You're helpless from the very beginning. Now, why children? Children were like this. I think about that. First of all, they're a nuisance. You know, children. I have children, you have children. You have to take off from work. Children have to be fed. Yeah, children have issues and so forth. Get rid of them. And another thing, which I thought much later, children can grow up and be witnesses. One of the things that Hitler wanted to the very end, to when even in Auschwitz, when people were dying, he would send his military people to shoot those who were just about to die in case they survive, and they'll talk. No witnesses. So kids are great witnesses. I'm a great witness because as a child, I'll tell you how I remember so much. I also live a long time. If I were like 50, 60, I wouldn't be here to tell you the story, but I was 5 or 6. So of course, I'm here. 80 years I've been telling the story, and hopefully more. So what I'm saying is that's why the children and the elderly were the first people to be destroyed. And of course, my always thought is, and there was silence. There are people, when I went to Germany, and I also went to Dachau, I don't know the name of the gentleman, of the prominent person, he was in Dachau. You know how close the other people lived to Dachau, the normal, you can see it. And yet they claimed they knew nothing about it. There wasn't a place in Germany that civilian could not see what was going on. But they claim they weren't there. They were on vacation. They don't remember. That's what they do. That's the type of denial of that generation. The new generation is completely different, which is great. How come I remember so much? Because I was very lucky in a way. I was with my mother a lot from the time till I was about 5 and a half. After that, I was separated. So when things happened, I said, "What's going on? What is that?" She says, "This is happening. Yes, this is cholera. Those children are dying. Those children that are walking on the street, like we were in a ghetto, you know, and we went somewhere because ghetto was a gigantic place. About, 250,000 Jews were in a ghetto of about 16 streets. So, and we couldn't get out. You all know what ghettos are. I don't know the kids who are here. I'm sure they know about ghetto. It's a space where you are there by force and you can't get out. So when I saw all these kids walking around, I say, why are they walking? Because their parents were killed. They don't even have food. She told me that. And I'll tell you why she told me that. Because throughout the whole war, she had an inkling that I'm going to be alone sometimes. And in order to survive, I have to have survival skills. She can't say to me, "Oh, it's nothing." No, she could have done that. And I know parents have that type of a skill. Parenting is different for everybody. I could see that. No. She said, this is what's happening. And if you aren't quiet, you will die. You will be shot. At that time, we weren't yet at the place where they were crematorium. Shootings. Shootings was the thing of the every day. I heard, well, we lived in a ghetto with a lot of people, and I was under the table a lot for many reasons. A, there was no space. B, I liked it there. It was safe. I remember I had blankets, and my mother would give me food, and I don't remember suffering under the table, but it was a long time. In fact, later on, I had trouble walking because I was sort of sitting squunched there. But so I could hear everything, and I could see everything. And then my grandmother somebody came in. I never saw the faces, and they shot her right outside. And then my father one day came, and that's the time when I got out from under the table, and I stood by the table, and I remember him saying, I just put them on a truck. They didn't have to explain it to me. I was about 4.5. I knew that meant that they were old people. They probably weren't more than 50. I mean, my father was a young man. I was a young girl. I'm looking at my family now, maybe 55. They were elderly already because they were useless. They didn't have the strength to work and those who are like 20 or 30. So when he said, I put them on the truck, and his tears coming down, I said, oh, I won't see them anymore. They're killed. And I knew how. You know how I knew how they were killed? Because people talked about it. Don't forget, in that little room, we didn't live alone. There were other families. People talked, and I listened. Every child listens. People make a mistake thinking children don't know. Children know everything. They may not be able to verbalize it, but they know. I knew what happened to my grandparents. They were undressed. Everybody was always getting undressed. You know why? Because we were animals. We were what is called Untermenschen, people who were beyond, underneath people. I don't know the English word for it. Subhumans, that's the word in English. Subhumans. So clothing is for humans. Animals don't wear clothes. What is it to be ashamed of? Animals aren't ashamed. That's what I knew happened. I didn't see it, but I know it. My grandparents were undressed. They stood by an open grave, and they were shot from the back, and they fell in. That was the end of that. I knew I'll never see them. And then one day my father said, you know, your Uncle James that you like so much, you're not going to see him anymore. I said, oh, he was a lawyer. My Uncle James, whoa, I knew. He was killed. And later on, I found out why. He was a Jew that was born in Poland, was educated in Germany, got his degree there, came back to the hometown and offered to be an interpreter. His German was perfect. Anybody would do anything to save their lives. And he was married to my aunt. They looked at him. You want to be an interpreter? And they shot him. That's it. There was no discussion. I remember ghetto very well because there were less and less people. I remember diseases because I heard it. I heard everything. And I didn't see elderly people anymore. And then one day we got out of the ghetto, and we went somewhere again. I remember there was a church, which is interesting because I saw the church years ago when I went to visit my town, and I thought to myself, I wonder what those people in their church thought. when they used the church grounds as a killing ground. They killed most people because the trains had come and they were taking, there was concentration they already had built. Don't forget, they improved the killing machine every few months. In the beginning, the gas would kill 500 people in 25 minutes. That was too slow. So they did it to 15 minutes. That was the end. Who did it? German scientists. Scientists could do that. Simple person couldn't do that. So they were liquidating the ghetto, getting rid of it, and sending people out on these trains. I and my mother were outside, and then they were shooting just because there wasn't enough room in those trains. So those who were left were sent to a different place. This was my next trip, my next stop. It was a labor camp. There was different because my parents worked the whole day. The ticket to survive another hour, another day, was to have a permit to work because they needed slave laborers. They needed people to work in their in factories, ammunition. And this trip, when I went to Germany, I went to Dachau. The people who are now like guides, by the way, the people who were guides were Nazis. They were children of Nazis. They told me their grandparents were Nazis, so they give up their life to give tours and to talk about the Holocaust. You know, it was a very interesting relationship between myself and those guides there. And you know what they told me? Well, the reason that many people survived, among them my father, by the way, was because he was taken, if the Germans couldn't use them for him, for themselves, they used them at a factory. And some of the factories were American factories. Some of them were big factories in Germany that are still functioning. They used slave labor, and the money was paid to the Germans, the Nazi. So let's say my father was worth $300 a week. He didn't get it. He was a slave. The Germans got the money for him. So slavery was part of their, either for themselves, for their machines, or for other companies. And that's when you could survive. They used you until you die, until you couldn't work anymore. Then they shot you. I was a whole day on my own as my parents went to these factories. That's where my mother taught me real behavior. She said like this: never have eye contact, because eye contact, you will recognize them. They will recognize you. You have to be invisible. So I did. I never looked up. In fact, I didn't see any of the faces. I was 5. I looked at their belts. You know, the belt had an insignia, or on their arms, because they were holding the dogs. Then she said, if you see a dog, don't run, which is counterintuitive. How can you? I still don't want to touch a German Shepherd to this day. And she said, stand still, because they taught to kill if you run. So I learned. And then she said to me, make sure when you see them coming, stand still, put your hand in the back, look down, let them pass. That's respect. At one time, some woman, I don't know what happened to her, an adult, she had eye contact, and she didn't give right of way to this sub-officer. There was a public shooting, and my mother took me and said, this is what's going to happen to you. You see that? You see that? So I remember saying, Mom, no, I'll do what you say, but you too, right? You're not going to face the Germans. She said, no, I won't. We are behaving. If you follow the rules, you will live. That's what I remember so much. She kept talking to me all the time. That camp, that labor camp, there were less and less people. I knew because they were selecting them. One day they came for the children. There were very few children left. They had all been killed before. They put them on trucks, but I was hidden. I was hidden in a crawl space. My mother kept her hand on my mouth so tightly that I had black and blue marks like that for I don't know how long. But I remember it, and we never talked about it. As I saw all my little friends, I knew what was happening. The same thing that happened to my grandparents. They're going to get undressed. And by the way, the graves were dug by the parents. Like my father, his age group. That was the healthy age group. They did all the work. So do you know when there were trials after the war and somebody would say, you killed so many people, the Nazi would say, I did not. And the truth is, he didn't. He hardly did anything. All the graves and everything was done by us, by the Jews. All the dirty work. And in Auschwitz, even more. They were forced to do even more. So once all the children were gone, I couldn't leave the house anymore. And I was indoors for about a few weeks while they went to work. I knew they were gone. Once a day, they brought me some food. And then one day, my mother said, oh, you don't have to go anymore. You can play outside. I couldn't believe it. I haven't been outside. I haven't seen the sun. I said, and I saw her packing. I said, what are you doing? She says, we're leaving. Where to? She says, Auschwitz. I was exactly 5.5, a little bit older, 5, maybe 7 months. I knew about Auschwitz. I knew about everything because nothing was covered up from me. Everything was there, so that if I am alone, I will understand what's going on. And that's when they separated, my father and my mother. We went on those cattle car. My father was with the men, I was with the women, and I was there for 36 hours. No food. And you know what was the worst part for me? Which is so interesting. Talks, about civilization. I was upset that I couldn't go to the bathroom in privacy. I was only 5.5. And I said, Mom, I gotta go. She didn't answer me. I could smell it. Everybody was just going wherever they stood because we were animals. We were in an animal wagon. So, and when we arrived to Auschwitz, I remember, there was a lot of light. It was summertime, like July. And the first thing I said, what is this smell? She pointed to the smoke. I knew that people were being burned. She didn't cover that up. And then we all got undressed. Again, I told you, half the time in Auschwitz, people walked naked in groups. winter, summer, because they need, you know what they did with the clothes? They took our clothes and they had special people who cleaned and washed and ironed and fixed. They take those clothes to send to Germany for their own families. They even used our hair because I was shaven. And I remember looking for my mother. I didn't recognize her. You know, your hair, excuse me, everybody knows. It's our identity. I mean, even not only for teenage kids, for us, for adults, it's our identity. Can you imagine no hair? I couldn't find my mother. She put her hand on my head. Then I know it was her. And then we walked into the Auschwitz itself. Question, which I didn't know until about 5 or 6 years ago. I read it in a book. Why was my transport? Why were the children not? Oh, I was the only child. Why was I not killed right away? What's a 6? I was not 6 yet. My birthday was in Auschwitz. I was like 5 and 8 months or something. Why did I get into Auschwitz? I found out from a professor who did some research, and my name was in his book, that it was a Sunday, and there were Christians. I never found out what kind of Christians they were. They didn't want to work so much, so they had 4 crematorium and gas chambers going. They didn't want to open up the 5th, so they let us. They said, well, Auschwitz-Birkenau is a death place anyhow. It doesn't matter. So they let me in. It's like this woman said, every day was a gift. Every day you may be able to be saved. Every hour. So we walked in, and I remember we got a middle barrack. And here my mother's teaching me again. You know, she said, there'll be a lot of people, more women sleeping with us. So at night, you got to be very careful not to turn around so much, because everybody will have to do the same. Okay. Then again, the bathroom. The bathroom. Mom, when can I go to the bathroom? She said, only when all of us go. Twice a day. I said, what if I can't hold it? She said, you will. And I did, by the way. I learned. That's how she taught me to survive. If you try to be invisible and you follow the rules and nobody sees you that much, you may make it for the next day. Okay, a lot of things happened. I don't know how much time I have, but there so many. She taught me about food. They would come around with food from these big kettles. And she said to me, listen, if you lose your bowl and your spoon, you will die from starvation, because they don't look at your face. You put out the bowl, you get some food. No bowl, no food. And people are going to try to steal from you. Then I became clever. I said, not for me. I remember holding on to the bowls and spoon and a cup, 3 things, like my life depended on it. And it did. Nobody stole a thing from me. But the biggest worry to me was that I would wake up in the morning and see all these people who had died during the night, and they would come and take them to the crematorium. Being ill was absolutely the worst thing on earth. Being ill means you can't work, you're useless. Crematorium, gas chamber. You could, when you walked out, you could see a bunch of 40, 50 people naked. I only know women. I was in a women's camp. I did not see men. But they were like emaciated, and they were being led to the crematorium. I knew that because they were useless. They couldn't work anymore. Well, one day I got sick. And then absolutely, I got scared. I didn't tell my mother. I got sicker and sicker. And I remember I couldn't see. Apparently, I had scarlet fever. I only learned after the war. And diphtheria. I tried to keep it away from my mother. I knew that I'm going to die. That's it. But somebody saw me. So they picked me up and they said, she can't be in here. And they took me into like a hospital without doctors. All I remember is getting in, and then when I must have had very high fever. And I survived. When I woke up, this woman said to me, oh, you're awake. Let's go. And she gives me a pair of shoes. I don't know how to put them on. I don't know. They were white with laces. I never saw that. She said to me, a 5.5-year-old girl should know how to put on a pair of shoes. I'm 5.5. I didn't know that. Took me, there's some other little stories I'm letting out because I don't know how much time. I'm taken to the children's place. The first thing that happens to me, they tattoo me. Now, I remember standing online, and there was this young woman. Well, to me, she about 17, Jewish, 17, 18, and she's talking to me. You know, every time you talk, you remember. Every time you think, you don't always remember. It's the language. She said, I'll give you a very small, neat number in case you survive. Get yourself a long shirt, a long sleeve shirt, cover it up, and nobody will know. And my first thought was, I'm going to survive. I'm going to survive. I thought we have to die. You know, I didn't know what Jewish was. The word Jewish, Zid, Jude, they were words connected to me, but what it was exactly, I did not know. We had no religion. As far as I remember, I didn't even know what religion was. I didn't know what God was, but I thought that a Žid, a Jude, has to die, and I'm one of those people. So when she said, you may survive, that was the first thought. Well, let me give you a few incidents, and I want to tell you, by the way, every time that I survived when I shouldn't have, was luck. I don't want to think for a second that I'm chosen. Because if I am chosen, what happened to the others? Why were they not chosen? What did they do? So luck, I need some water. One day, after I was tattooed, I come back from a little walk. We always walked around outside. And there's a package waiting for me. How can that be? How can I have a package? It was a package from my mother. Somebody read to me, happy 6th birthday. I am 6. I didn't even know people did anything for birthdays. It was a piece of bread, which you can't imagine the joy. I thought of bread as insurance that I won't die. So I took the piece of bread and I hid it under my little whatever I wore. But I didn't know about bread getting stale or anything. In the middle of the night, big little feet. They were gigantic rats. Ate up my bread. But a miracle, they didn't touch me. I could have gotten a disease. They could have bitten me. They could have scratched. Nothing. I didn't even taste my 6th birthday because now I eat my dessert first. One day, they said they're going to give us a gigantic breakfast. You know, it's hard to talk about starvation. You really have to be there. There is no way for me to describe it to you. But when they said it's going to be food, I knew what it was because the barrack next to me with little girls was given a breakfast. We heard everything. We knew what was going on because they were going to the gas chamber that day. And that was my turn. You know, I didn't care. I didn't mind. I wanted to eat. I don't care what's going to happen afterwards. So I remember eating, then getting dressed, and then starting to go down this outside. I was in the last row. We were partners, so we had we were holding each other's hand. And on the right-hand side was the women's camp. And I hear a voice, and the voice knows my name. And I say, how can somebody know my name? Oh, must be my mother. But I didn't see her. There were so many women there, I couldn't distinguish her. So she said, where are you going? I said, to the gas chamber. And they started screaming, the women. And I said to the little girl next to me, why are they crying? Doesn't every Jewish child goes to the gas chamber? It was like normal. Death was normal. The only question was how and when. And will it hurt or will it be quick? It wasn't a question whether you will die or not. We go down. There's a gigantic room, twice the size, I think. Cement all over, with all around numbers. And there's a voice that says to us, look at the numbers, because take off your clothes. Again, naked, right? When you come out, you have to find them. Well, I couldn't even read the numbers. Do you know, I could not remember my number. The woman who gave me the tattoo had to teach it to me. I didn't know what 27,633 was in any language. There was Polish, but I didn't know. I couldn't figure out the sound corresponding to the sign. So when I looked around the room and I saw all those numbers, I'll never find my clothes. Still thinking, maybe we will come out. I don't know. That was the way they did things. So I looked at my neighbor, my little girl, and I wanted to see her clothes so I can recognize it. Hours we stood there naked. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened. They sent us back and got dressed after it was dark and freezing outside. When I walked up, I remember the women were still there, and I hear my mother saying, what happened? And I apologetically said to her, oh, they couldn't do it this time. They'll do it next time. It was a way of life for us. Let me go a little bit quick, fast forward. Weeks go by. Auschwitz is in chaos. Shooting. We don't go out on the street at all. We locked in. All of a sudden, she appears. She looks terrible. I don't recognize who this person is. She knows my name. And she says to me, listen, do you know, see all that shooting outside, everything what's going on? Yeah, I know, I hear it. They are gathering all the people, and we're going to start walking to Germany. You know how far Germany is? 300 miles. I don't know. She said these things to me. And it's snowing outside. Look at my feet. They were oozing. She looked, she was swollen. She had no shoes. She said, I will die on this march. By the way, 95% people died. It's called the Death March. You will survive. She looks at me. I do not want you to stay alive by yourself. This is not a world for children. I don't want you to live without anybody. I want you to, will you die with me? She asked me. She didn't tell me. Will you die with me here in Auschwitz? I'll get you out. We'll hide. If they catch us, we'll die together. I said, yes. What a great option, right? Rather than die alone. Take her hand. We get out. Terrible outside. Shooting, the dogs, the screaming. They're getting everybody into a marching position. She finds like a dormitory, like without doctors. She walks in, it's all women, and they're in bed, and they're so sick. Some people are crying. I do not let go of her hand. I'm holding on to her. And she goes from bed to bed, and she touches every woman's face, especially the one that are dead. I didn't ask her what she was doing. I never asked my mother what she was doing. I knew she was doing the right thing, whatever it is. She finds a body that she likes. It was a nice-looking woman, and the woman was still warm. She picks me up. She puts me with this woman, and she says, you will be very close to her. Try not to breathe. Breathe into the floor. I knew exactly what she wanted. She maneuvered my body in such a way where I am sort of breathing into the floor, and she disappears. I don't know where she is, but I know she's not far away. She wouldn't have abandoned me now. I hear shootings. Oh, and she said another thing. No matter what you hear, because I couldn't see anything, I was completely covered. Don't do anything. Don't get uncovered. Don't say a word. Behave as if you're not here. I will be the only one to uncover you. Good. I knew how to follow orders, especially my mother's. So there she is, and she's gone somewhere, and I hear this noise and shooting and screaming. I hear people crying. I hear people being yanked out of bed. I could hear the scraping on the floor, and I don't react, and screaming and begging, and they came for the sick. They were so afraid to leave witnesses, they were murdering those who were just about to die anyhow. I don't know how long it lasted. And then all of a sudden I hear steps. Somebody is checking whether my dead woman is really dead, because some people pretended, so they would shoot them. So the person, I remember, I could only hear the boots, right? And I stopped breathing. I didn't even want to breathe to the floor. And I said, how long? And I don't know how long I could have been able to handle this not breathing. But the person went on to the next bed, and I could breathe a little bit. But I was so still when all of a sudden I smelled smoke. And I couldn't breathe. I said, how can I? not do anything. I can't breathe. I was thinking in my head. I still lay very still. I can't breathe. And all of a sudden, she uncovered me. This is what she said to me. They are gone. There was January 1925. The Russians came the 27, but the Germans left 25th. And I remember and when I looked around the room, there were all these people, women, pushing away the dead bodies that they hid under. It looked like the bodies were falling, off, and they were getting from under it. And we all started walking. I had no shoes on. I couldn't find my shoes, although I came with shoes. Don't know what happened. And we all started walking to the it's still electrified a fence. It was electrified because what they did was they set Auschwitz on fire. They didn't want any witnesses. They destroyed as much paperwork as they could, and then the buildings. And 2 days later, the Russians came. Had they come a week later, I wouldn't have been here. So January 27th, I always think of my birthday because I really felt that that's when I started my life. January 27th. And thank you. What time is it? Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't want to kiss you because I have a cold. I'm always a word short. So, there are young people here, right? I saw them speaking here, all these young people. My story is now really your story because I don't know how many more years I'll be here to tell the story. I'll be very happy to be here 5 more years. But I really give it over to you. Please. The elderly people can do it also. The middle-aged people can do it too. Everybody can do it, but the ones I'm counting on are the very young, because they'll be here longer. So when none of us are here, and you will see us only on videos, and somebody will tell you, these videos are fake. You could do anything else you want with videos. The young people who are here will know that you cannot listen to the deniers because you know better. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tova, for sharing your story of survival with us tonight. We will never forget what you endured at such a young age. Your story will stay with us forever. We are now witnesses, and we will never forget. Please welcome Newcastle Holocaust and Human Rights Committee member Rhonda Regan and Enough Club students Sydney Goodman, Sammy Rose, Serena Shiro, and Jared Shiro.
I think we said I can take a few questions.
Sure.
But that's up to the organizers.
Okay. We want to echo the words that Tova ended with. Eli Wiesel, a Holocaust survivor and winner of the 1986 Nobel Peace Prize, was famous for saying, "For the dead and for the living, we must bear witness." Everyone who listens to a witness's story becomes a witness themselves. These powerful words are engraved in stone at the entrance to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C.
Holocaust survivors like Tova have made promises to share their memories to prevent the horrors of the Holocaust from ever happening again.
With anti-Semitism rising, Holocaust denial spreading, and the number of Holocaust survivors diminishing, our responsibility to share these memories is greater than ever.
Tonight, we ask that each of you make the following personal pledge. In 2025, I will share Tova's story or the story of another survivor with 1 to 2 people.
Tonight, by you being here and listening to Tova's story, we have created 400 new witnesses. If each of us shares Tova's story with one other person, we will create another 400 witnesses. Thank you for taking the time for taking this pledge to help create a world where the kindness of one can and will always outshine above the darkness. Now, please welcome Town Supervisor Victoria Tipp for closing remarks.
I want to start by thanking the Holocaust and Human Rights Committee and the Enough Club. The co-chairs of the Holocaust and Human Rights Committee, Alexandra Rosenberg and Stacy Scions, and the Enough Club, Ava Millerman and Jared Scions. The work you do is consistently exceptional, and you bring such meaning to our lives, and so we really owe you a debt of thanks. But most of all, Tova Friedman, thank you. What you do is the most important thing. Like someone said, bearing witness is one of the most important things you can do. And you've used your voice, a voice which is one of the most powerful tools to educate the world. And as you were speaking, I realized that although you're a mature woman, yours was the voice of the children. And by listening to you, we were listening to children. And I found that in a heartbreaking story, the most heartbreaking. But thank you for keeping that voice of the child alive. And you have given voice to those children who were silenced. And through you, they continue to speak. You have shown us that it's not only important to talk about what happens, but how it happened. And the way it happened, among other things, is the failure to reject hatred. And it was allowing the normalization of horror to take place and to go on. And by the silence that you talked about so eloquently until it was too late. So you remind us that it's really important to be here not just as passive listeners, but that as human beings we have the power to make choices and the power to choose to be active participants in rejecting evil and in choosing humanity. So for that and many more other things, Tova Friedman, we thank you. Good night.